So I say welcome back. We've obviously not had this podcast series just yet. This is the episode 2 of season 1, and we're introducing today Jason Bierton. So I don't know if you want to just give us a bit of an intro of what you do, who you are, how you got here. Just all those three things condensed into a single line.
Oh my goodness! What was it again? Who am I?
Who are you? What do you do? And how have you arrived here, ArcSpace?
Okay, so who am I? So I'm Jason. I'm a chartered architectural technologist.
Get that one in there quick.
That's it. Yeah, get that one in there. Long title. And what do I do? So as a chartered architectural technologist, I try and help deliver projects in terms of the construction detailing and specifications on behalf of the contractor to get things built. So as far as I understand, architects will have a lot of conceptual training, put everything in motion, all the planning policies to adhere to, etc. Get it through planning, and that's where typically somebody like myself as a technologist will come in and help to produce details, liaise with all the coordination of all the different disciplines and get it built. So that's what I'm here to do. But it was obviously a long journey to get here.
Well, that was the next question. So you've teed that up really nicely. So what was that journey? Obviously, you'll get into this, I'm sure, but there's a kind of the boundary of academia and practice. You've sort of jumped across that for a number of years now, and there's a lot of discipline required to do that, but also there's a lot of sort of benefit to both roles, I suppose, to be able to kind of understand what the new trends are through the academic sort of sphere, but also then bring that through to the professional and understand kind of the realities of the commercial practice of architecture and of the industry that we sit within. There's a lot of sort of shared interest there, which we'll get onto later, but I mean, I guess that journey, what is that journey? How does that look?
Oh, it looks a mess. It's I wouldn't say it's tried and tested, it's jumped around. I think one of the things that I quite like about these items is I'm always willing to share my experience because obviously other people are going through their own journeys, and I think sharing my experience hopefully will put some context into you don't have to know it all at any stage, and even now I don't know it all by a long shot. So started off. I got okay GCSEs. They were all grade C. I should have tried harder. I was fortunate enough to probably be clever enough that I didn't have to do too much homework and all the rest of it now and again. So I could have always done better, but enough to get through. So, and then college. I didn't know what I actually wanted to do at all, to be honest. Even when I was at school, I thought I wanted to be a footballer. I enjoyed sports. But wasn't really. I was probably too late to the field, to the profession, to kind of like really make inroads. So when I got through to end of GCSEs, I had no idea what to do. So I enrolled back in sixth form, turned up on the first day with all the same people I already knew, in the same buildings, with the same teachers, and just thought it wasn't for me. So that afternoon went to the college and enrolled on a course that I thought was going to be something I might enjoy. So I enrolled in business information technology at the time, which was all pre internet kind of bubble and all the rest of it. So quite good timing.
Sure.
And so I enrolled on that, business IT, and also the family kind of run their own business. So it was kind of with a potential insight into working for them. I did the 2 years and then still didn't know what I wanted to do. And I think that's where I thought, well, I'll just continue on my education. I have no idea what I'm doing. 17, 18 years old, no idea.
There's a lot of pressure to know what to do the rest of your
life. A lot of pressure, well, yeah, exactly. How do you commit? And especially when you've got that feeling that, well, I could just fall into the family business, but then what happens if it doesn't work out? Or is it kind of where I want to be? If I'm going to be there forever, maybe I want to spend a couple more years just having to think about it, or travelling or something.
Trying new things.
Yeah. So I had a kind of an interest in law. Again, just ad hoc. One of my favourite films is My Cousin Vinny, so...
It makes
I mean,
sense.
that's probably where I got it from.
Led by cinema.
That's it. So I enrolled and started doing law at University of Wolverhampton. I have no idea why. I kind of like the campus. It was far enough away from family to be away, but close enough to be able to get back in a couple of hours. So yeah, no, nothing too deep or anything on the selection of the course. But I'd not been to uni before, obviously. I didn't know anybody really that had been to uni before.
Were you the first one in your immediate family?
No, my auntie's been to university. So yeah, but I just not very familiar with the kind of setup or arrangement. So I went and I enjoyed it, but I missed tutorials. I wasn't aware of tutorials. I wasn't aware of these other sessions. I was attending lectures, picking up assessments, but not understanding that actually there was other classes that were part of the course. I had no idea until probably 2 months in. And I already felt quite far behind, obviously lagging in even the friendship and support groups on the course. So I just felt like it was flawed off the bat, really. So I struggled to kind of recover, and by the end of the year, I'd basically not got enough grades or anything, So it was a case of, do I redo it or recalibrate and think about what I wanted to do? So I did take a year off. I worked in Birmingham and thoroughly enjoyed it, working in hospitality.
You say hospitality, was it like a bar or?
Yeah. I was the nightclub supervisor for Walkabout, which was a huge restaurant bar nightclub.
Is that the one down by the canal?
Yes,
still there, isn't it?
Yeah, still there. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I loved it. It was really good. Really, I met a lot of people. There were a lot of people.
Building.
Yeah, character building, and met a lot of characters. They coming across from all around the world, coming to work there. So I loved it. I had a great time. And then just thought that felt guilty, obviously, for having a year of not much progression at university and then a year working. And I thought, well, I need to get back to uni and crack on. Plus, at that time, I was receiving a grant. So I had that 1 year paid up in terms of fees. And I thought, well, I've got 2 years left on that grant, so I'll choose another course. And I started a HND, Higher National Diploma, in Business Information Technology at Sheffield Hallam. So I decided to go back to my roots, as it were, and come back close to home. And Sheffield was for me like a no-brainer. So, but again, I did 2 years. I completed the HND. I could have topped it up for a degree. I could have got on a placement. But it just didn't interest me. It did not interest me. But in that time, I'd kind of been doing a few bits and bobs for the business, doing some drawings of buildings and things like that.
Oh, this is a family business, isn't it?
Yeah, a family business, yeah. So they're involved in reused steel, portal frames. And I'd done some drawings to help them sell those on. So I thought, maybe some kind of design career would be appropriate. I think my dad kind of wanted me to be a structural engineer. He thought it was always a license to print money, he said.
Probably was back in the day, probably was. Similar to architects, there's a perception which just, for whatever reasons, deteriorated over the last 50, 60 years. But professions generally, I think, sit within that category more broadly, don't they? Where once upon a time, it was probably quite a fast-track route to not just financial success, but just, within society, like societal success, being, on a pedestal. If you were an architect or you're a lawyer or you were a doctor or you were an engineer, it's like that was the drive, wasn't it, for a very long time? So it's only when you get to the side of that you think, actually, well, where's that gold? Where's the gold at the end of the rainbow? I've been chasing that for years. And it sounds like this is the journey, this is the rainbow. Actually, what a quick question.
Yes.
So when you started going back into, well, you say you went back to university, you think about technology, you think about going back in, or looking into construction as an industry, because obviously you've got a family business around that. Was it with the intention to help the family business, or was this something you were trying to build?
Yes, this was more tangible in terms of becoming a designer, so I can maybe design the buildings in future. We could fabricate, and so there was a mindset to add to the business and its value later down the line. Still not specifically kind of we don't have an outline of some type of progression, as in. Yeah, maybe we start fabricating, therefore design. But we'd not really got a clear route through, and I didn't still know what I was doing. So when I was 20, still no idea what I was doing really. So anybody out there that's still not got a clue at 17, which I can't imagine that they will, don't worry about it. I'm now 40 odd, and I still quite don't know whether I made all the right decisions and choices, but stick with them and see where it takes you.
There is a healthy criticality to that, isn't it, where you start looking at your role and speculating on, was that decision the right one? Could I do something now? Is it still where I want to be? Because again, the other thing is, whilst the system tries to make you kind of decide on something and stick to it forever, you as a person will change over your life, and so too do your needs. In your 20s you're probably a little bit more carefree, and in your 30s, your 40s you may be settling, you maybe got a family, maybe got commitments with a mortgage and things, so you probably want a little bit more predictability as opposed to adaptability and all the rest of it. So it's the I think it's just as you go through things, just to add to what you were just saying there as a bit of advice, is accept that things do change, and change isn't always bad. In fact, it's often quite good to mix things up. It's knowing, that. That's
it. Even when change is bad, that's still a good thing.
It's a lesson.
Because it's a lesson. You learn something from it. What not to do again, or what questions to ask next time, etc., etc. So I wouldn't see any changes as bad.
But in terms of your career path, and you've gone sort of full circle, so to speak. You've gone kind of far away from home, learning a skill set which, whilst it may have supported the business, it could still be something which you build, uniquely and separately to the business. And then you come back to sort of Sheffield, and at that point you were living in Sheffield, presumably, and learning a skill set which would have a kind of a more immediate translation to the family business. So what at that point would you say that's where you started thinking, okay, architectural technology? At what point did the phrase architectural technology land in front of you, and you thought
that's a good question? That's a really good question, because I went through the printed prospectus.
You didn't get very far through that, did you?
I just got beyond. I opened it up, architecture, 7 years. What's next? 4 years.
Sounds about
right. That's nearly half of it. So let's give that one a go. Yeah. I think it was a case of maybe I don't know. The pedestal that you were saying, maybe architecture I saw as probably too high a pedestal to chase. And 18 was kind of like, I can probably justify a 4-year course, not another 7 years in education after I've already had technically a failed one, not knew what I was doing in all of them, and still technically didn't know for certain what I wanted to do. So making a 7-year commitment felt a bit of a leap too far. So I think AT was a good grounding. So that's and I thought, reading the prospectus, it seemed to kind of suit me, problem solving, drawing, technical drawing, so all these little facets seemed to kind of come together. I thought, that's something I think I can be successful in as a course, and I've got a lot of crossover in the interest. So I took that on. I got through the first 2 years, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then placement year came up. And I thought all I wanted to do at the time was become a CAD specialist or a CAD tutor and teach people how to use the software. But after my year in practice, which I thoroughly loved, it changed. I wanted to get involved in everything. So delivering projects right from at every stage.
Well, just talk me through that practice then. So, how was it a practice near to home, or was it somewhere you were familiar with, or was it completely out there? You had no idea what to expect, and you just threw yourself into it.
Yeah, like everything, I had no idea what to expect in life. Just threw myself into it, give it a go, and I wrote out my CV, posted it, chased up via phone calls. I'm very fortunate to get an opportunity at Axis Architecture in Sheffield. So just round the corner, really lovely, friendly bunch, doing some really nice, quite eclectic sectors. And I loved it. It was fantastic, getting paid to do something that was fun, interesting, on the doorstep. But at the same time, I'd also met Liz, who's now my wife.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, and she was at university in Lincoln. I was doing a lot of commuting to Lincoln at the time. So I made the decision after 3 months. You can see a pattern here, constantly keep on changing due to outside influence, my own desire to I don't know, just all over the place still. So even though I'd found something that I really liked as a career in terms of the job, and 3 months of absolute brilliance, decided that I would move to Lincoln. So I moved to a separate practice called BUJ Palmer, which doesn't exist now, and I spent best part of 9 months there to complete the kind of placement year. Then did a bit more because Liz was still at university there and graduated. And then Liz moved back home, which was just outside of Nottingham. So again, jumped ship and moved across to Mabel. Had an interview, liked what they were doing, some big work, some big projects. And I thought I'll give them a go. And I was there for, I moved to Nottingham, so I again chased Liz around and completed my placement year and started working whilst I was completing my final year at uni. And I actually split that over 2 years so that I could continue to work at Mabel more than just the, on average 3 days a week.
It's good to kind of hear that even then there was flexibility, because I mean when I was looking at architecture and studying architecture there was one route seemingly, and it was difficult to see how that 7 years, as you say, you look at it and it's like an edifice in front of you, and like, oh my god, how on earth am I going to get through that? Whereas what you're saying here is actually there's and I think it's quite similar for architecture now more broadly, because there's different pathways and things to get to through registration, but with AT and with other courses around architecture and within the built environment discipline more generally, there seems to be a lot more flexibility to not even just from A to B. It's kind of coming in between that and saying, well, the entry point's different. You don't all have to have gone through your standard college experience or your sixth form and then through enrollment and all the rest of it. You can actually get into it through experience or through a combination of experience and a different kind of qualification or something. And then even when you're in there, like you say, there's flexibility to say, right, well, life sometimes does get in the way and you have to make decisions for a partner or for a dependent or otherwise, and that doesn't have to be the end of that route that you've already defined. You can perhaps figure out a way of making it work if you care enough about that. Then you
I mean, it was trial and error. I had no idea how flexible it was all going to be, and everything worked out. That's the fortunate thing, I chopped and changed, and fortunately, the jumps all helped, and they were fairly straightforward. But I'm sure that they might not have been, but fortunate for myself, there was. So I trial and error. But yes, there does appear to be more opportunity for the flexibility now in courses, particularly AT and things like this, where it's a much shorter course. But
it's also having the confidence, I suppose, to broker that conversation. So look, I'm going to be moving away. How is there a way of making this work? And if not, like, what can we do in the short term to maybe accelerate or to pause or to do something to make me to maintain this pathway instead of it having to be a kind of definite change in circumstance or a change in approach. You can just sort of make it work for you. I think that's quite important, because I think, and you'll probably appreciate this as well, having been a tutor at NTU for a long while, is working with students, particularly post-COVID. It's a very different environment where people do feel quite anxious about even the most, from a kind of a professional perspective, where you see people day in, day out. The base level of interaction can be quite difficult. So to have the confidence to say, actually, you know what, can I pause? Can I do this? Can we build in flexibility? I know a lot of students will and have sort of made decisions more kind of prematurely and close down opportunities in the future because of the immediate issues that they're dealing with. So I think it's good, as a sort of tangent to what you're describing there, is just to have those moments where you say, right, you know what, right now everything's it's overwhelming, or there's something in my life which needs my attention, so this either gets paused, or I'll have a conversation with a tutor or with the school to facilitate what needs to be done. And I think architecture, and again, this is by no means a general kind of description, but I think from my perspective, architecture, or kind of architects generally, are and have been quite defensive over the industry or of our role within the industry. And I think AT has been a really helpful supplement to sort of, as you say, appeal to people who otherwise wouldn't look at architecture, but also to make architecture as a route, as a career, as an education facility, make it, you know, change and adapt, because the idea of being that sort of cliche architect sat behind a sort of brass plaque and waiting for the work to come to you is completely gone, isn't it? So I think the cultural shift has in part been helped by courses like AT, and I think people like yourself, and I think by people like me and other people who have studied architecture, in that we've expected more from the profession. It's had to change. So those gateways, you have to make some tough decisions, like you have, getting to that point where you're like, okay, well, what works for me? How do I get into a career, into a job that actually aligns with my interests? Well, it isn't as easy as sitting down with or not always as easy as sitting down with a mentor when you're 16, 17 and saying, right, okay, well, that's what I want to be, and then working towards it. Sometimes it's a bit more of a wiggly path, isn't it?
Oh, very much so, yeah.
Very wiggly.
Very wiggly.
As long as it's in the Midlands area, that's been the wiggle of your. I mean, you've obviously moved beyond that as well, and you've had moments in sort of down south as well. So I guess we'll get to that. But before we do, I think what's quite useful and interesting, I think, is understanding the sort of nature-nurture context of all of this. So, where we're from informs quite a lot of our decision making in the earlier days, and we've already touched on that with regard to your family business, and having that kind of an eye on whether or not your life will engage fully with that, or whether you'll have that sort of separation. So maybe, it could be quite useful just to summarise, what is the Jason's childhood looking like, and how did it shape the man that's here today?
Yeah, well, it definitely does. It's constant in the mind. So family. So I was born in Worksop, so local to Nottingham. I'm the oldest of three brothers. And my parents, so my dad has always worked for the family business, so it's kind of like a 3-generation kind of business.
Was it his dad's?
It was his dad's before, slightly different. So previously my granddad was a timber merchant, so they'd go into buildings and reclaim timber, so they'd literally be stood on the top of a timber frame building and be knocking all the brickwork down and the roof off and all the rest of it as they're removing the timbers from it.
Sounds safe.
Well, no, but so they were doing that, and it provided for my granddad, who had got my dad was one of 5 brothers and 5 sisters, so quite a lot of mouths to feed. So I think there were a lot of family members working for that business at the time. My granddad was quite lucky to win a contract with British Rail to replace sleepers on the rail tracks, and became quite wealthy through that. But kept the wealth, if not spent it all, gambling. My dad, once my granddad had died, my dad took over the family business, or the debt, and helped support his brothers and sisters. And decided to move away from timber and looked at steel frame buildings instead, and has been doing that ever since. So 30 odd years, going in, taking down, removing all the cladding and all the rest of it, and also keeping hold of that as well and selling that on. Personnel doors, overhead cranes, all the lighting and mezzanine floors, anything else that's in generally industrial buildings, and then taking down the frame, which was the main part of the project, and then selling that on and re-erecting it elsewhere. So, very early, kind of pioneer. There was nobody else really doing that.
It's circular, isn't it?
Very circular. It still is. If anything, that's probably the most prominent item at the moment in terms of circularity, because it's something that doesn't necessarily need to go through any more processing. It can be unbolted, taken down, put up elsewhere. Robust, it's steel, and it has numerous lives that it can go through. So it's so he's a bit of a pioneer in that. So and then my other two brothers now work for my dad. My mum's always worked for the business, and childhood was good from memory, especially with two brothers beating each other up and kicking the ball and all the rest of it. So childhood was nice, but I never felt pressured into any kind of career or anything really. Just generally kind of be a kid and be happy and be supported. So
awesome. I mean, what was the area like? Obviously, it's kind of like the old mining communities.
Oh, indeed.
It's a sort of, I mean, again, from sort of my own experience, you sort of declined to these areas growing up, where maybe there is a transition period, isn't it, from industrial blue collar to a different era, and I guess you were at the edge of that. That's the sort of fault line, isn't it? The sort of from Thatcher onwards, I suppose.
Yes.
Some would argue, of course. But I think that change in the economy of the UK is something which is sort of settled a bit more recently, isn't it? On the sectors we're talking about and sat within now. But I guess back then, like you say, it's interesting that there was no clarity or pressure on where to go, because maybe that's kind of something which was shared by a lot of people. It was the big unknown at the time.
Yeah, I mean, it might have been that. It might be due to the family business bit possibly being the backstop as the idea, but it might have been due to the limited kind of industries in Worksop at the time. The largest I think employer was a sandwich factory that produced sandwiches for Marks and Spencer's, Boots, all the rest of it. So not exactly a glamorous career. I did work there for one weekend.
The whole weekend.
One weekend, and yes, it was definitely not for me. Not saying I had a good time doing it, but it just the hours, I could see my future there for the next 50 years, and it didn't fulfilling. It didn't look very different. So so there was not really much in Worksop industry wise, and those odd few jobs that might have been worth it, like a trainee manager for a letting agent or something, but my parents always knew the manager or the businesses. It was a very smallish community, so they always thought, well, it's a bit you don't want to work for them, or it was never quite. So so it was either the family business or I needed to jump ship and leave Worksop and go to the nearest city, Sheffield, and and that's kind of what I did eventually. With moving to university at Sheffield, but
Is that typical of like your friends and things you grew up with? Was there a general surge towards cities, or was it?
No. So at college I worked in the hospitality. I worked in the kitchens and bars with my two best friends, and once we all finished the same course, they moved with the landlord at the time to a new larger pub hotel that had just been built to run that, and I decided that wasn't what I wanted to do just yet, and that's where I instead went to university. I thought I'd continue that And they did very well for themselves, but no, there wasn't many people that went to university. To be honest, I don't think there was anybody from my college course anyway that went to university. So it was just myself. So again, didn't have anybody else to bounce off, or you know, how you getting on. You know, they'd all pretty much gone into employment.
It's interesting, isn't it, how things shift? Because again, like from my own perspective, I think it's probably quite similar now. It's university is, and has been for a long while now, this sort of default path that most young people will be contemplating, at least. And it's not always the right path, of course, but it does, again from my own experience, it opens up doors and it gets you talking to people you otherwise wouldn't talk to, and it's sort of, I see university as a sort of, I don't know, one big paddle, and it's steering the country up. It's like making sure people are, you know, if you grow up in a small town, you might end up in a city, and if you grow up in a city, you might end up in a small town which has got a university kind of nearby, so you learn to kind of, I don't know, so there's a kind of collective empathy perhaps that it builds into you, so you can start seeing things through other people's perspectives, and you can start engaging with communities and groups that you perhaps otherwise wouldn't, and I don't know, I think we're all the better for that in many ways, because it builds in a level of I don't know, society, that concept of society. You're more familiar with not just this kind of area, but this area, and then fast forward, I don't know, maybe it makes it easier to, as you say, when you get into professions and things, you've kind of got a network which you can loosely engage with.
Oh, definitely. I think it definitely broadens the opportunities and the connections, broadens the mind. I just definitely, you know, I've got cousins and nephews and others that are coming up to that kind of age, and I've always told them that actually, you know, unless you know what you're doing, get some travelling done. You know, don't commit anything just yet until you've got a little bit more confidence into knowing what you might want to go into, and or otherwise knowing what questions that you want to ask. I think when I went to university, I didn't know what I was doing, where I was going. I didn't even know what questions to ask. I just felt overwhelmed or out of my depth. And I, being a tutor as well has shown me that, you know, there's a huge number of students that come into university, no idea what they're doing, remind me of myself, and then eventually, you know, fall by the wayside through circumstances, and it's a year wasted. Well, I think a bit of travelling, whilst you've not got if you haven't got the commitments and you've got the opportunity to do it, you know, see the world is definitely what I'd recommend now for anybody.
Did you do any of that?
No, I've never done any travelling whatsoever. I think I would have loved to have done it. But again, I had no idea what the opportunities were out there. I didn't know the questions to ask. You know, for me, it wasn't a consideration. Never even thought it was an option. So
I think it's a lot more. I mean, again, last 30 odd years, it's become increasingly accessible, isn't it? The wider world. And I mean, I know I didn't do any extensive travelling either when I finished university. It was kind of straight out of university into a job, and I always was quite envious of the idea that you could take a bit of time, and you could take a month or two or even a year, just figuring things out, just as you say, getting out of your comfort zone, meeting new people, seeing new things, because you're a bit of a sponge, aren't you? And I mean, I think we always have, to some extent, every day you learn something new, but particularly when you don't have the commitments and the routine, that's the best time, I think, to just get yourself out there, learn, experience, and then, you know, through that there's growth, and you'll end up hopefully figuring out, if you don't know what you're doing already, you'll figure out what the next steps are just by being out there.
And the fact that you just won't put the restrictions on yourself as such. You know, if I was to go and do the travelling now, there's no way I'd make some of the decisions that I would have definitely made back at 18, you know, places I would have gone or wouldn't have gone. You know, very, very much now, much more conservative and risk averse. Whilst back in the day, you know, you do take risks, but those risks generally will generally pay off. You know, the world is a nice place filled with nice people generally. So you know, most of the time you will hopefully have a good experience. But right now, you know, that benefit of the doubt, I probably don't give as much as what I used to probably would have done. So I definitely think that age is great for just doing a bit of travelling, trying to find yourself, trying to answer some questions, think about the future, see what you like, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, even if it was a travelling to go and work in different industries and see different things, I think will add masses of value and interest. So
Well, it's just, yeah, the soft skills, the hard skills, all the rest of it, isn't it? It's just understanding like what drives you, but you don't have to always be on that path. You can take a little sidestep, figure things out, and get back on the path whenever's right for you. And it, you know, that's kind of what you've done to some extent. Is it's been kind of like cyclical in that you've gone round and got back to a certain point, but that path has probably been something which, even in the back of your mind, has been directed by context, you know, your family and people that you meet along the way, and obviously Liz, and how all of that kind of, I know that forms at the backbone, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. I mean, obviously the geography kind of items, keeping close, family and Liz, and then the context of the family business and or interests kind of align and pull you into so many different opportunities. So I think everything did kind of start to come in a line when I was at Maber, and then Liz got her first job in her discipline in Sheffield. So eventually it again came full circle.
Back to Sheffield.
And went back to Axis Architecture and loved it, and was there for a year. And then we decided to buy our first home. And as you do when you're younger, sometimes you have to jump ship to get a little bit more money, because you're not, you know, you're still learning, getting experience and knowledge. So you might not be seen as the commodity that you are after a while. So, I jumped ship and went to a company called Bon Bryan, where they paid me a lot more money in comparison, in relative terms for getting a mortgage. Yeah, of course. At the time. So we bought our first house and settled in Sheffield, and had 2 fantastic years at Bon Bryan, making lifelong friends, getting some good experience, and then 2008 hit, and we had the fallout from the government funding of LSC and BSF projects. So all the education projects kind of put on hold, and Bon Bryan were an education specialist at the time. Difficult. 80+% of their workload was education projects. Wow. So it was a tough time. Went through a 3-4 month kind of period of consultations and redundancies, and there were 3 lots of redundancies, and I was in the third and final lot of people to be made redundant. At the time it was like, horrific. You know, it was all we could discuss, it was all we could talk about. Yeah, you build that life in that area, you're happy, you've got a routine, you've got but not knowing how to pay the mortgage, all our friendship, the whole friendship group, not just me and my colleagues, but all my mates, colleagues, wives and girlfriends, we were all out together all the time, and it kind of fractured all that. It slung us here, there and everywhere for jobs and work, and stretched everybody. It was very difficult at that time. I thought it was like the worst thing that could have happened. I spent a year at another practice in Chesterfield, WCEC, doing supermarkets and retail parks. And again, I wasn't really. They were very good at doing it. I did learn a lot. It didn't necessarily float my boat, but it paid the bills, and it was fine. But it felt like everything was kind of still up in the air. But during this time, Liz had kind of worked through her kind of career path, and there was an opportunity to move down south for a really good job, for her to really progress within. So we decided to just jump ship and give it a go. So I followed Liz to Bristol.
Wow, a bit further south than Nottingham.
A little bit further south, but just a good opportunity, really. Try something. And me and Liz had been married just over a year, so it felt like a really good kind of. It was me and Liz, going out into the world and trying something. It felt really, in a way, really good. Got no idea what to expect, but as it all works out, as I say, generally things work out. So I thought that being made redundant was the worst thing ever, but actually it put me on the path to working at the time at what I thought was one of the best experiences that I ever had. So I ended up working at a practice in Bath, which when I started I hated. We were working in a bunker. It was so quiet. Nobody was talking. It was dire to move from like a practice at Bonbright, 130 people, all getting on, all having a laugh, but working. It was proper work hard, play hard. It was brilliant. To end up in a bunker with 15 other people felt very.
I can imagine, yeah.
Well, it was garbage. I wanted to quit straight away, but I'd move. It wasn't a case of I'll just move to another practice. Like I might know other people like in Sheffield or whatever else. So this was a new area. Didn't really have the opportunity to start. So I decided to be the change and get people talking and eventually. I mean, it took a long time, but I have had feedback from the directors of that practice and other people in that business that said that I was kind of like a catalyst for revolutionising that practice, And now when you look at that practice, everybody's vibrant, happy. They're speaking, they're talking. You go into the office and it's a place people want to be. When before it was just it was dire. So I gave that a go. I was there for 5 years, 4.5 years. Liz was doing really well. In that time we were down south. We had Isabel, and then when Isabel came up to being 3 years old, needed to make a decision whether we wanted to make a life and continue it down south. We'd moved to Bath at that time, or whether we moved back up north with family and friends, grandparents particularly, so they could spend time with Isabel. And we thought that support system was probably more important, especially with my brothers having children as well, similar ages. So we thought that was probably just a leap too far to commit to. So
it's a fair drive, isn't it, down to sort of Bath Bristol area?
It's not bad. It's a couple of hours, but it's just the fact that they're not on the doorstep, and grandparents are always like we all are, getting slightly older, and. It's just nicer to have your support system on the doorstep. It's very different. When it was just me and Liz against the world, it was great. We've got each other's backs. But when you've got a child, you kind of need other people to occasionally step in. Not so that you can't do it. It's just that we've got a support system, and we thought that we'd take advantage of it rather than.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, rather than, and also that they'd Isabel would get so much more from having that support system, I think. So we moved back up north. The furthest we could move was Nottingham, so I couldn't move back to Sheffield, which I was gutted about.
What do you mean you couldn't move back?
Liz's job.
You're barred from Sheffield.
No, not at all. No. Liz's job. She works as a crime scene examiner for the Transport Police, and they cover large swathes of the country. It's almost split into like 9 different areas. So you're kind of almost going to be in the centre of that area to make it work. So for example, when we were in the southwest, Bristol, her kind of geographical area was everything from Land's End up towards Gloucester and into Wales. So you could be, if you went to a job in Land's End, you could be 7 hours away from your next job. So Bristol was kind of like centre of that, and similarly the Midlands, Nottingham is kind of Nottingham, Birmingham are in the centre of that. So those are kind of where she's based. But Sheffield was too far for be constantly commuting and being at one side. So it was
makes sense.
So we came to Nottingham purely because I kind of was familiar with it after working at Maber. I kind of knew a little bit, only about the centre. Only commuted in on the train back in the day. So when we were looking for somewhere to live, just lent on previous contacts to tell me where to go. Nice places for families and all the rest of it. Made the leap into moving to Nottingham.
Again, full circle. We're back in.
Tell us about it.
Nottingham, which you've been in Nottingham ever since.
Yes, Nottingham was it's grown on me. It's definitely had some money spent on it since when I was a student here on the placement at Maber. yeah, it seems to be struggling again now, but I'm sure we'll get onto that another
Yeah.
time. But yeah, we definitely came full circle. And rather than going full circle and back to Maber, I decided to work for a different practice and had a good opportunity. I'd been doing some lab work and other kind of office buildings in the south. So they'd got a project on called Bioscience, and they kind of sold me on that one. So there was me and a chap called Matt Greenhalgh, project architect on that, working together to deliver this, £30 million new build lab in the centre of Nottingham, and with some quite interesting designs and especially the facade that was being designed by a specialist, and that needed coordinating. So it was a really interesting project with a great practice that was also very sociable, and I loved it. Delivered the project, and it was all good. And then another company that I had an interview with previously offered me an opportunity. I thought to get into, moving up the ladder. So I thought I'd give it a go. I've got nothing to lose, which was a bit of a shame actually, because in hindsight is a good thing.
Always.
I missed the CPMG kind of lot. Everybody there was really nice to work with. They always got some interesting projects. Always. There's always like a key, a gem of a project that they've got on. Somehow they seem to manage to procure them. I jumped ship and it didn't quite work out. I got, again, good experience. I was working on data centres and regeneration of a Midlands town that took a lot of my time, and I thoroughly enjoyed those. But it was at that time that I'd had some feedback off other people I was working with that seemed to kind of, they all aligned in terms of, I'd had some previous really good experience in Bath with Maber and CPMG that I was sharing, and I'd got reasonably good design skills and all the rest of it, and they thought that I'd make a good tutor. And at the time, NTU were advertising for tutor, and I thought, well, give it a go, just hourly paid lecturer, maybe do that. I've not been back to uni ever since I was a graduate myself, so I had no idea what to expect. So I thought, hourly paid lecturer sounds about the right kind of thing, just to
Oh, was that alongside your job then?
Yes, that was the intention. That was the intention. Maybe just, there are other people, like in most practices, there's always somebody that seems to be a tutor, and have that opportunity to get into university and meet other people, and that's what I kind of wanted, to meet other people that wanted to progress architecture was the main intent, and share my experience and knowledge at the time. So I went along and had, well actually I was booked in for an interview for the HPL role, but I thought to preempt that and get some skills, I would to the there was a lecturer role available as well. So I thought I'll go get the lecturer interview, see what the crack is, and then go for the HPL role a lot more informed. But when I came out of the interview, they offered me the position of a lecturer. And I really ummed and ahed about it, really quite nervous about it. No idea what to expect, but I thought, just jump at it.
Try it.
There's
a theme emerging here, isn't there? Where it's just
there is just try.
You just jump in there, see what happens.
Well, I wanted to give back. I wanted to share my experience and knowledge. I thought, well, that's a much more
quite a structured way of doing that, isn't it? And it's like you say, it's an oven-ready interface with people that you've suggested you want to get involved with there. It's students who are coming into the profession, which you've got a lot of lessons that you can share with.
That's
and
it.
Hopefully steer them into a less wiggly path, perhaps. Or to
that's exactly Or actually, fully dive in and enjoy the wiggly path. It is just another path. So neither of them are right or wrong, but just share that experience so people can make more informed decisions and become better informed designers as well. Put my views across and experience. So so I started in 2017 as a full-time lecturer. I started 1 month before the course was due to start. I had no materials. I had no idea how to deliver anything. At the time, it was a relatively small department. The principal lecturer that was leading the department was off on maternity leave. There was another member of staff that was coming at the same time, an experienced lecturer from Sheffield Hallam, Mark Botham. We started on the same day, so he was really good to support me, but obviously he was still in a new setting.
Yeah, of course. Just figuring it out.
Everything, yeah. There was another third lecturer that started the week after, Richard McCarg. It was me and Mark, and there was another chap who started the week after, Richard McCarg, another lecturer. So there were a lot of newbies in a relatively small department, and we all supported each other in helping to deliver on our needs.
Well, it sounds like almost you helping each other figure out what the course actually is as well at that point.
Well, everything.
It's all just like completely new.
Yeah, all new. I mean, like I said, I've not worked at university ever before. I've never stepped inside a university since I was a student before. So everything was new, full of opportunity.
Yeah.
But as most people that do know me, it didn't quite pan out that first year. I felt like there was an element of sabotage going off. Significant, harassment from one member of staff that was my line manager at the time, and really made that first year a real hell. I wanted to succeed. I wanted to pass on the experience. I wanted to take advantage of this opportunity. So I did that for 2 years. The second year got a little bit easier, just purely because I distanced myself from this other person. But this other person was an absolute a disease on
so it's a big word, but again, I think we all sort of have moments in our lives where you meet people like that. At first glance you don't know, but
the surprising thing is I've been very fortunate. Yeah, you get people that are very nice in the world and that, but they come and go. They'll bully and all the rest of it at school or whatever, but they come and go. This person was in what I'd consider in a developed society, a university that is leading the way in helping to develop society. Has got other people to answer to, lots of checks and balances, and is responsible for providing the next generation with somebody to look up to.
Yeah.
And this person was an absolute horrific person, and I still believe still is. This person knows who they are. But they just couldn't go away. The university system allowed them to operate and flourish. So I decided to then reduce my hours, go down to, at the time I think it was like 3 days a week, but it still wasn't enough of a reduction in workload. I was still working all the time. I'd got young, I've got Isabel and other items I wanted to do outside, but everything was just being swamped by my experience at uni. With just the workload, it was immense. So I decided to go 1 day a week and get back into practice, and thoroughly enjoy being back in practice. So decided to make the full leap back into practice amid university, and I've never really regretted it since. It's not to say that I'm in contact with the university. I'm still in the books. I still offer support and guidance and nip in for different events, etc. But I don't think I would be prepared to jump back unless there was a significant change in their leadership. But to be honest, I love working in practice. It's where actually the cutting edge occurs. Because really, I thought when I was going to university, I would be bouncing more off the other lecturers and really discussing how to progress items. But that didn't really kick off. Everyone was too busy. We were delivering the teaching.
It's very reactive,
we weren't part of the research kind of area or anything. So we were just delivering. So very different. So actually, it was a flip. It was the students. I thought that I'd struggle working with the students. In the first year, I did struggle with the students because I was trying to find my feet. I was, like I say, being sabotaged. I was quite stressed. So I wasn't as amenable time-wise to suit their needs, which actually was the most important thing.
Of course,
really helping to develop these people.
Well,
all
it's
from
why you get
different
into
backgrounds.
that role, isn't it?
Yeah. So I did find my feet eventually. I think the first years, I have seen them since, some of them, and they did tell me that might have been a bit of a douchebag, but it wasn't intent. It was just how it panned out. And subsequent years, especially now working with previous students, the feedback is good.
Yeah,
it's good feedback.
I've
done my best to help them, and that's been seen, and I've shared my experiences and knowledge and helped them progress in society and in practice. So it all works out in the end.
Mm-hmm. But I think you can as well. You can support from afar. It's good to have the connections with universities and to, where possible, sort of dip in, share some information, share some knowledge, have that relationship. It's kind of what we're doing here at Art, trying to maintain a kind of a degree of separation, because we don't want to get brought into the sphere of the, as you say there, the kind of machine that is a university. It's very procedural and very kind of a complex organisation.
So they'd also soak up every hour you give them as well. So, there's a lot of...
So the separation
demands.
is very, very useful. But so too, I think, is the moments of engagement where you do have a student who is perhaps a little bit untethered or unclear in their intent with that course or with that module or with that project, and you can sort of get in there and almost surgically say, well, look at that, try this, and share some of the wisdom, because the stories, this story, everybody's story has got so many lessons within it, and that is, it's always been a kind of a frustration of mine that universities sometimes can sterilise that into becoming what education in the UK has always been, which is all kind of a box ticking exercise. It's not about kind of necessarily opening the platform and speaking on a kind of human to human level about experience and knowledge. It's more about, can you demonstrate your knowledge through X, Y, and Z? There's no room for A, B, and C, and it's just, I think, that third space which we're promoting here at Arc Space and supported by Art Design Studio is really important, because that gives us as former tutors and professionals a platform to engage with the university, but without having the, as you say there, the kind of organisation sitting above you and maybe kind of in some cases curtailing the support that you imagined you were delivering at the beginning of that process. Yeah.
Well, when I look back on it, the bits that I really enjoyed the most was working with the students, and especially those students that really did engage and ask questions and were willing to share the kind of issues that they were having, and I could help steer, help open doors, and that's where I kind of felt like I was quite a good conduit between the students and industry. I'd help them become more comfortable and open, like I say, open doors. Help get them an interview somewhere, and then further down the line be like, everything's going really well, and if you're looking for anybody that's wanted a placement, so it just kind of like snowballed into all that positive kind of assistance kind of kept on going, and provided a return. So
it is quite a small network, isn't it, the industry, particularly here in Nottingham. I feel like, you in particular, I think everybody in Nottingham when it comes to architecture and architectural technology. So you can, just through speaking to people and networking, build that kind of community quite effectively. And particularly if you're at the other side, like you say, you're kind of in the academic context and you're providing a bit of a gateway and a portal to these practices. Very soon you'll find that the practice is populated by people who you've directed, and there is a really positive synergy there, I think, between practice and academia. But unfortunately, I think in a lot of cases that it takes a character like yourself to want to do that. And there's a lot of kind of...
Well, I think there's a few things. Obviously, as providing professional services, nobody wants to not look professional. But I'm quite happy being professional, but I'm quite happy to share mistakes, because mistakes is obviously a huge item that you can learn from. And lots of people share successes, but very few people share their mistakes. But actually, that's where some of the biggest lessons are learned. So I'm happy to share that and really kind of... discuss things right down to the basic level, and then build up from that. What actually is it that we're trying to achieve with this, rather than get too far away from the core issue. And I think that kind of mentality of being open, honest, and trying to consider the real issue kind of connects better with different people at different levels. So, you know, those that are junior starting out, hopefully they can understand some of the process that I'm trying to get to, whilst others are recognising that I'm sharing mistakes, for example, and that makes them feel a lot more like normalised, or not normalised, but more that they can all share and join in better, and not feeling like somebody's, you know, oh, they've worked at university, they've been a lecturer, they've been in industry for blah blah blah.
Almost
untouchable. So when actually, you know, I like to think that I'm approachable, honest, open, and will always be like that. So, you know, problem shared, problem halved, no matter
100%.
what, which actually, you know, has come back to be really beneficial, working in a brilliant space with lots of different businesses, doing lots of different things, meeting lots of different individuals that have got business concerns, personal concerns, everything. And actually it's a really good melting pot for discussion. So so it feels like, again, just landing on my feet. So
well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, that's one of the things, isn't it? It's, I guess, as you've done, is moving around and trying new things and changing perspective, you know, physically, but also within the fields that you've explored academically. It's getting yourself in a situation where you are able to, A, make mistakes in a controlled manner without obviously, you know, having a detrimental impact on everything around you, like the business, commercials and things, but it's having people around you which will encourage you to learn from that and to grow through mistakes. And two, it's about having other people around you from different perspectives who can shine a light on the same problem but from a different angle, and you might then find an approach which wasn't first kind of apparent to you. So that's, from our side as architects, is kind of a key part of the co-working community, is sharing those problems and trying to get a kind of a much more detailed and complex picture of the problem before you go in there and make a decision. So, you know, that consultation, if you like, even if it is just a casual conversation by the coffee machine, is really useful. And then equally, like I say, it's been in a position where you get on with people around you, so that if you make a mistake, you've got somebody's got your back. And as you said, when you were working the practice down south, having that, when you enter somewhere and you know that people aren't engaged and there isn't that sort of connectivity, that is very quite stifling for growth and for you know, creative problem solving. So a key part of, I think, if I was going to kind of focus on a soft skill for an architect, it would be about, and an AT of course, would be, you know, don't be scared to communicate. Communication is key. You know, ask a question, make a note of something, introduce yourself, make sure, because the industry is built on interpersonal relationships, is start that as soon as you can. I mean, you might be the best designer in the world, but if you can't communicate it...
Well, if anything, it was kind of like that one was a really good life skill, because it was the, you know, when you hear people say, be the change.
Of course.
And you know, step up and challenge. And that was the first time I proper thought, no, this needs to be challenged, I need to step up, be the change. And that was, and I think from then on it's kind of just be confident enough to voice things, and we should be challenging things. If things aren't right or need to be changed, then be the change. So yes, I learned a lot from that experience.
And that, and I think that, speaking from, you know, one of the directors of Art Design Studio, I think that's one of the biggest attributes that you can find in somebody in the team, is somebody who isn't just going to sort of reflect the status quo, isn't going to kind of uphold something because it's easier to do so. It's to say, right, you know what, I know we work like this, but have you considered doing that? That didn't, you know, that probably wasn't the right way of doing things, or maybe we could do this. It's the growth, not just of the individual, but of the practice. And for that kind of change in scale to take place, you've got to make sure the individual within the practice has got the freedom to express and communicate. And I think that's kind of what we try and, I guess, maintain over the longer term, is encourage people to just communicate. You know, and that's not just with the Art Design Studio. We through Art Space and through these kind of stories and things, it's trying to get the message out to the people viewing this that we are open, as you said. You know, we're kind of quite a friendly bunch. We're in the middle of in Nottingham, and we've got a lot of socials and events and things where we try and get what's happening here out there. So if there's anything happening out there, if people are kind of struggling to figure out the next step, or they just want to pop in for a chat, well, we're here. And that's the key thing, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. As a space and as people, we definitely add a lot of value, both professionally and personally. It is a fantastic space,
and we're building it. You know, it's still something which is evolving, and I suppose that's the next chapter in the Jason Bierton story as well, is how we formalise that, and how that, you know, fast forward a couple of years, how is that mentorship, you know, that, because I think you've got a naturally sort of, what's the word, patient approach to things, and you kind of have the skill set which you would always look to for a mentor. So it's having.
I've always thought, you know, try and be the person that I needed to be when I was in practice.
That's a really good way of looking at it.
So I look at it like that. Plus, also on the flip side, you know, I want to leave a legacy. You know, I want the next generation. You know, when we're talking, Sude and Josh, you know, we talk about ethics and morals and instilling that kind of thought process of how impactful and how wide our input is in society and people's lives. Plus also I want to leave that legacy for be able to my daughter to look at it as well. You know, as built environment professionals, you know, we're leaving things that are going to be here for minimum 60 years, but and they may be here for hundreds of years. People are going to use those in all facets of life. So you know, we want to be leaving the best that we can, and it's very difficult to do so in what is a very commercial world sometimes.
No, I mean that's really really interesting and important point, and that's probably what we should end on. I know we kind of at that, but I think there's another podcast on the back of that in the future where we sort of start talking about the importance of that mindset in the built environment, because like you say, there's a very different dynamic with construction professionals whereby what we create is there in many cases much kind of longer than us. So
indeed.
So what's that? What's the relationship? How do we kind of equip people to not just design for that, but to understand what that is and how we can, you're designing for something which, you design for the future. So well, I'll pause it there. I mean, where can I? This is the point where I usually say, where can people learn more about Jason Bierton? Do you have like a digital presence, or is it more just pop in, have a coffee, and?
I'd rather people just pop in and have a coffee. To be honest, I'm always available. I know I've got my gaffers to appease, but I'm always available if people want to give me a call or pop in. I'd prefer them to pop into the space and see the value it can add and the opportunities it can create. But yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as well, so people can find me on LinkedIn, send me a message that way. But best thing to do is pop into the space,
space. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I hope everybody else is, or all the viewers and listeners, enjoy that as much